talking about rumors of players into and out of MLS. So, like we mentioned, this has already been brought up a little bit by the Athletic, where they gave an outline. I think it was Tom's own article, and Tom gave a 11 players who are out of contract who may be able to make a move over here. So what we're doing is we're kind of splitting it in half. We're going to take 2 players from that list and 2 players from that are not out of contract but might be able to make a move, and we'll talk about it a little bit. So I do want to preface this by saying we're not breaking news here. Like we're not trying to dive into the world of breaking MLS news. That's not what we do here. We're just speculating on things that might be a cool move in the future. None of this is fact or certainty that anything at all is going to happen. But with that being said, why don't we talk about the one that's probably the most talked about right now? And that's Marco Reus, out of contract at Dortmund, not returning, ending a legendary career in the Bundesliga. The report is that preliminary talks have been held with St. Louis. They have a DP spot to play with, but there's also rumors that they are after Cedric Tuchart, a German striker with Hanover in the second Bundesliga. And the value of that deal could put this Royce deal, if it were to happen, in jeopardy. Tom also reports Chicago and LAFC as logical landing spots, but I think St. Louis are the front runners, probably because of his connection with Roman Burki. Your thoughts on this being a potential move for St. Louis?
I mean, you would think it's perfect for St. Louis, right? Like they went full Bundesliga route to start things off, and it worked phenomenally for them. The chemistry was it was game changing for expansion franchises to see somebody go in and go for guys that aren't necessarily household names, but have played similar styles, played in similar leagues, have that little bit of chemistry that might give them a good like first step. And Marco Reus obviously follows that those footsteps easily. My huge concern though, and I'm sure it's the same concern that everybody else has, is with age and injury history. Like how much is he going to actually play if he's here? And is there a risk that if you give him a DP spot and he's hurt a lot of the time, that you're now like you're stuck and missing a DP spot by bringing him in? It's risky because you may not get a lot out of him if he can't stay healthy, but I think there is really good upside to it. I mean, Royce is obviously a legendary player. I still think he's got more in the tank, and he fits in super well with the St. Louis team. But we'll have to see what happens. What do you think? Is it worth the risk for St. Louis? If you are St. Louis, is it worth the risk?
Well, I think there are 2 sides to this, right? Firstly, the casual eyes, right? We talk about the people who are going to watch just for Royce, and then possibly stick around after. Now, St. Louis doesn't necessarily have this issue, right? But the people where he would travel to would go out and say, "Oh, this is the atmosphere isn't too bad. Whatever, I'm going to stick around a little bit longer." That's kind of the first idea, and I think it'd be a home run for that sort of fan base, that attraction, right? This is the guy who's like that poster boy. Everybody posts about him being the guy who wasn't tempted by the Bayern money. He stuck it through thick and thin, and lots of respect for him. Lots of respect for him for doing that. Those people, I think, would come out and be like, "Oh man, it'd be really cool to watch him play." That being said, I think he would probably fit in similar to like Emil Forsberg has right now. Wrong side of 30, no doubt. Injury history, sure. I think he could still contribute, but to what level, I think, is the question. And St. Louis is known for being a super high press. They're currently they're third in tackles, the attacking third right now in MLS. Suggesting they still favor that high press system and are actively looking for their attacking players to be defensive when they're not in possession. At 34, with the injury history that you mentioned, does he have the legs or the ability to withstand all of that mileage and high intensity work? We know that if you have a player who doesn't commit to that style, it'll fail. Or if, like you mentioned, he goes in and they try to put him through that and he gets hurt, now you've got a DP spot, tied up you can't use elsewhere. And then the other option is Carnell to change the system, but I don't think we ever see that. So I don't think it's a bad move for MLS. Is St. Louis the right fit? I'm not so sure. Yeah, he's from the Bundesliga. They still have that mindset, but what else does he give you? Where, he's listed as a number 10, right? In the attacking mid role, that's probably okay for him. But if they were to use him a little bit wider, that they've already got a plethora of players in that spot that they would have to either knock down or they'd be limiting minutes there. Um, does that help them? Does that hurt them? I don't know. Do I think there are better fits for him? I actually kind of do. And Tom mentioned LAFC is one of them. I think that's a better fit for him where, if you combine Royce with other players who are more willing defenders in that attacking front and let him fill maybe a Sasha Kljestan role, which they can do, or just to play provider to Buwanga in quick transition like they have been, I think that's a sick look. I think he fills that Vela hole as well, where if you need to play him as an offset nine, where he drops into the hole and turns and plays, he can do that too. LAFC have two DPS right now, but Atuesta can be brought down, right? So new incoming roster rules, they could bring Royce with a DP9 or somebody to balance out whatever his role would be, and they're right back in business. What do you think about that?
So I was just looking it up. I don't know how accurate it is, but Wikipedia only has Buanga as a DP right now, so I don't know if they've already bought down
Yeah.
Atuesta.
So I took my information. Remember, I showed you that like list that MLS actually
Oh yeah, yeah,
was
yeah.
proper released. Atuesta is listed on there, and it shocked a lot of people when that happened as well because they didn't think he was. But that's how he's listed. So he's listed
Okay.
as the guy who can be bought down, which is good for them. Which is probably why he's not really thought of as that anyway. Because if they need
Well,
to,
I mean, yeah, it's LAFC. They would surely buy him down if they had the opportunity to. But do we know for sure what Giroud's going to take up? Is he taking up a DP spot or is he a TAM?
that's true too. I didn't think about that, but that's your DP9 right there, right? So I did forget about him. I forgot he was on his way in, but when I mentioned, they combine Royce with a DP9, there's your DP9. If he takes up, I'm assuming he does, right? I
I would
can't.
assume he would too. Even
Yeah.
even though he's a bit, well, I shouldn't even say a bit, since even though he's a lot older,
Mm-hmm.
I think he would still probably take up a DP spot.
Sure. But yeah,
I
think about
I
that. Sorry, I'm gonna say, think about that front three, right? Like Giroud leading the line, Bouanga doing all his work on the outside, and Royce kind of in the hole, just playing provider to either of them whenever he wants. That'd be dirty.
It would be, yeah. My only concern would just be like how long that team would be able to keep up, high intensity level of play throughout the season. I mean, that's an old front line. Like Buanga, I know isn't old. I think he's like what 29, maybe 30. So he's kind of in his prime, but Giroud's coming in at 37, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then Royce is 35, 34 or 30. He'll be
34.
35.
Yeah, when he comes, he'll be at 35. Sure.
Yeah, so that's a pretty aging front line. I mean, definitely loads of talent there. Giroud is different gravy. Like the man is 38 or 37, but he is still just as productive as ever. So I still think we talked about him previously, and I think I said that I think he'd still be productive here, even at like 37, 38. I stand by that. I don't know what that means in terms of like how active he'll be on the field. And I think Royce would be in a similar boat. So I don't think he'd be very active, but I still think he could be productive. It may change the way that LAFC like wants to play because I don't think you would see the same like I don't want to say like high intensity, but I guess somewhere along those lines. Like they would obviously not be able to press with the front line, you know, throughout full games, like throughout the full season. I just don't think they have the legs to do that. I think the upside is strong. I think it's a different situation from like Miami though, where you also look at a lot of like the aging players coming in, but those guys had ridiculous chemistry already coming in. Whereas these guys are going to have to kind of figure things out. They haven't played together before, Buanga, Giroud, Royce,
Mm-hmm.
but I still like the fit better for St. Louis, even if there is the more pressing style, and I don't think he suits pressing. But I think you find a way to get him in the team where he doesn't have to do that, and he could still be productive for the team. I don't think you have to change the system, but more so you find a spot for him in the system where the rest of the system around him can work things out. So I still think St. Louis is better in my opinion.
Interesting. There was the mention of Chicago as well. Jimenez is going to be bought down at some point, so they've got room to make it work, and they like to go big. I just don't think he fits the Chicago mold right now. They're struggling to get competitive in the East. They probably should be focusing on building a better core than making these big splashy signings. I mean, they've got more work than just one guy that that they have more work to do than one guy can fix, you know?
I'm sorry, Chicago fans, but for Royce's sake, I hope he is not going to Chicago.
Well, you know, that's Marco Royce. That is something that I think is probably closer to happening than not happening. It's just a matter of where he ends up and where he wants to go. St. Louis, I think, would be cool. I'd like to see how he gets implemented in there. It would be interesting to see where if there are other better fits there. Then you've got somebody whose name gets floated around a lot, and that's Sergio Ramos. Sergio Ramos is Chiellini level of wrong side of 30 if he gets here, right? He's 38 this year, 39 next year. He did make 33 appearances for Sevilla last year. He's got the legs to still play, and Chiellini did prove that you can be on the wrong side of 30, very much on the wrong side of 30, and still contribute. That being said, I think I would much rather take a flyer on somebody like Nacho Fernandez, for example, who's 4 to 5 years younger, also mentioned in the article. And he can contribute a bit longer, probably has a little bit more left. Now, Ramos would be the splashier, fancier signing, but it depends on which team you're going to. Now, both of those were linked to San Diego and Austin. And I think that each one of those players fits better in a different setup. So if Ramos were to come here, I think San Diego makes sense, right? It's your startup year. You've already got Chucky Lozano on his way, reportedly, but I'm assuming that gets over the line. You can market him and Ramos as the face of your team for a year or two, really bring in that new fan base that recognizes them from, you know, the Mexican national team being in San Diego, or even La Liga, which is a relatively popular league here. You know, grab hold of those fans right from the start, bring them in so they can see these players, and then stick around for the long term, right? On the other hand, I think Nacho Fernandez is a better fit for Austin because he can contribute longer and more immediately, right? They are much lower than they like to be on serviceable center backs. I think he'd slide right in, bring quality leadership. Nacho Fernandez, that is. You know, they're right now in the playoff spot, but I think defensive reinforcement would help, and I think Nacho is the better long term answer than Ramos would be. But I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Surprisingly, I think I feel the opposite way about pretty much everything you just said. Um, I
That's not surprising, by the way.
I would prefer Ramos in the league, I think, over Nacho right now, just because I mean Nacho's 34 at this point. Like that's definitely wrong side of 30, and we're talking about like a maybe 2 years difference versus Sergio Ramos, who's you're probably getting 1 or 2 years out of him, but you're talking about arguably one of the best defenders in history versus a guy who rode the bench for a number of his years in Real Madrid, who's now 34. So we're not talking about like Nacho coming off the bench for Madrid, but coming in at like 29, 30 in the prime of his career. Like I mean, we're heading towards the, you know, what's the right way to say this? The decline, I guess. That's the best way I would see it for both of them, honestly, because obviously both of them are well beyond wrong side of 30. But I still think Ramos, his instincts, he has really good physicality, sometimes to a detriment. I mean, we know how often he gets sent off. He'd be like an older version of Andres Reyes, but hopefully with a little bit more technical ability in defense.
That's not hard to do either.
Yeah. But yeah, I think he to me would remind me more of Chiellini than I think Nacho would, just because I think Ramos has really good instincts, and even at 38, I think he's got probably still some good physicality in him, which works well in this league because it is a physical league. And I would rather him be on Austin just because he is 38 at this point already. By the time San Diego comes in, he'd be 39 at this point in the season. I'd rather see him get in and play immediately than have to wait another half a year before he's starting to play in the league. So as much as I agree that Ramos would be a good face for the team for San Diego, we're talking about like your face of the team being 39 years old, like having to not have played for the last half season potentially, depending on however that works.
Mm-hmm.
Um, versus Nacho, who's a younger, as you talked about, like 4 years younger, who could probably afford that half a year and then come in and give you a few more years, while not necessarily having the flashy of a name. But still, I mean, he comes from the same club that Ramos made his name at. So while it's not necessarily the household name that Sergio Ramos is, like the Euro snobs, they know who Nacho is. They
Right.
follow Real Madrid, they know who he is.
Yeah.
I think they'll be interested, even if it's him versus Ramos.
Well, and here's the thing too, right? If San Diego goes and picks up Ramos, right, and they're like, all right, I want to keep you fresh, they do what everybody else does when they're coming into the league, and they buy whoever they want to buy, and then they send him out on loan for half a year or whatever, right? So he'll still find a way to play, I'm sure. I said I think both of them in the league is okay. I mean, Ramos does bring the Chiellini type of and the Giroud type of like, oh, retirement league, whatever. But that's still whatever you'd like to take of it is what you'd like to take of it. I think they both bring bring value to the league, no doubt, right? They bring value to wherever they end up going. It's just a matter of where the better fit is, and I think San Diego can utilize it better if it was Ramos versus Nacho then maybe Austin would. But again, this is all just kind of hypothetical, theoretical stuff, right? So we'll see how it goes. It could be a good little fun thing to watch. By the way, I doubt either of them are on their way here, honestly, but could be fun.
Yeah, it's a little bit hard to say because San Diego has nobody on the team yet, so we don't really know like what
They
direction they want
do.
to play.
They've got their goalkeeper.
Okay, sorry.
They've
I
got
stand corrected. They have one player on the team. I was just gonna say it's probably a bit hard to tell like what direction they want to go in with their team, the way they want to play, the guys they're gonna build around it. So it's a little bit tough to say like whether or not Ramos or Nacho would be a good fit for them. Obviously, like the people that are working at San Diego, they have an idea of how they want to play, and if they come out and they express interest in either of these players, then maybe it gives us a little bit more information on potentially how they're going to shape up and look. But the last thing I'll say on it is that, in my opinion, if either of these guys comes in on a DP deal, that's a terrible deal. I will say that I think they need to come in on a TAM deal. Otherwise, it is not a good use of a DP spot.
especially with the new way the rules are and how much money you're going to have to work with. Yeah, I would agree there. By the way, San Diego, their Duran Fire, 17-year-old goalkeeper, signed. Marcus Ingvartsen, forward, 28, Denmark, signed. Jeppe Vereskov, Danish, 30-year-old midfielder, signed. So they got three players. I'll have
Wow.
you know. I'll have you know. So as we mentioned, this was a story from Tom Scoops about out of contract players, but there are some players who are being kind of rumored that could be targets for MLS clubs because they aren't happy at their current club situation. They might want out or they might have fallen out of favor, whatever it may be. One of those, Timo Werner, who's up in the air right now after his loan move to Tottenham is set to expire. Spurs aren't sure if they're going to bring him back or not. They're still kind of weighing it out. And clearly he's not really fallen into favor with Leipzig either. If he had go out on loan, right? So if he doesn't get back into the mix at Leipzig, and if Tottenham doesn't bring him back, could another move potentially to MLS be on the cards? What do you think?
So I know, and this is coming from a Chelsea fan themselves, but I know a lot of people are going to look at Timo Werner. They're going to see his recent time at Chelsea. They're going to see his recent time at Leipzig and Tottenham, and they might have some skepticism. But I think if MLS is able to lure in a Timo Werner at 28 years old, that's phenomenal. Phenomenal. I would love to see Timo Werner come to the league right now. I mean, we saw what he looked like at his best. It's 36 goal contributions for the third best team in the Bundesliga. You're talking about bringing him in at 28, a guy that was able to accomplish that at 23. Like the talent is 100% there. We've seen it. He tore things up for Leipzig in the early days. I would 100% love to see him join the league. I think he would be extremely successful here, dominant, as long as he's in like a relatively decent situation. If he comes in and he's like joining, let me make sure. If I'm going to call a team out, I'm going to make sure I call a team out properly. New England, like if he's joining a New England type situation, maybe he struggles a little bit, but if he joins the right situation, I think he could like take off and really, really be successful in this league. And honestly, he's young enough that if he came in, dominated the league for like 2 years, and then he wanted to go back to Europe, I think he could do it. Come in, get your confidence back up, crush things over in MLS for 2 years, and then you're back in Europe by 30. And like you're still in your prime at that point. You could still have another like 4 or 5 years easily in Europe. So I don't necessarily see it as a bad thing for him, even though I'm sure a lot of people who follow the European leagues would say that him coming to MLS would be a massive mistake in his career. I think it could be very useful for him. I don't see why not.
What do you think the right system is for him then? Like you mentioned, if he comes into the right setup, like what is that to you?
I'd probably have to look at what teams have the availability for him because he would surely have to be a DP. I don't think he comes in at anything less than that. So that would rule out obviously any teams that have three already. But he's a very quick striker. Obviously, a lot of people know about him and like he gets offsides a lot, but I think that's because of the way he plays, looking to get runs in behind. So I would think a team that has good passing midfielders would suit him well, where you get him to sit on the shoulder of defenders and just look to make runs in behind all day long. And he's super quick and athletic. And like I said, he's still like in the prime of his career, 28 years old. Like he'll still be easily able to make those runs. So I'll have to think about it a little bit more to come up with like the right team to do that would fit him, but that's kind of what I would picture his like most successful style in this league being.
Look at you sound like a soccer nerd off the shoulder of defenders, balls in
I only
behind.
know things
Look,
about him because he was at Chelsea for a while. Otherwise,
look,
I'd have no
yeah, but
idea.
look at you speaking like you know what you're talking about. That's
What
why.
do you mean? I do know what I'm talking about. I have a podcast. I have to know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean you need to. Doesn't mean you have to know. There are tons of people who have access to say whatever they want on the internet, but they they don't know what they're talking about.
Oh yeah, that was me the first like 2 seasons.
I'd say the first 5.5 seasons, but it
I don't know
depends
about
on who you
that.
ask. Listen, he's already in the Red Bull system. Why not Red Bull New York? Right?
I was not ruling that out, but I
Right?
didn't know for sure if you had the space for him.
So we only have two designated players, right?
But you do have Dante already.
But here's the deal, right? Lewis Morgan outperforming his contract, right? Wouldn't be shocked if he's moved after the season. Currently playing as a second striker, but also plays as this wide cam that we do in this 4-2-2 sort of setup. Timo Werner is not a great lone out and out number 9. He struggles, right? His finishing isn't great. He gets into good areas, but he's not. First of all, he'd be a perfect red, right? Good pace, gets in tons of great chances, can't finish him.
Patrick
Sign him
Klimala
up, baby.
2.0.
Sign him up, baby. No, but for real, his pace and quality shines most when he floats out to the wide areas, right? When he can get in behind out wide and then just serve balls in. Let somebody else do the finishing. Well, if you look at Red Bull's system, they've got two wide attacking midfielders who do that often. Emil Forsberg is usually one of them, and the other one right now is being led by a rotating cast, but mainly Wiki Carmona, who has been good but inconsistent through 12 games. Right? He makes mistakes that a kid would make, and he's just a kid. Right? He's got time to grow, but he makes those kid type of mistakes where Werner can slot directly into that spot and be a game changer. Right? Get into dangerous areas out wide. Allow Lewis Morgan maybe to drop in off the ball, create combinations, whatever it may be. The thing is that Red Bull is also very fluid with that shape, right? So when we went and watched them against Vancouver, it started with, Van Zier and Morgan with Emil and Wiki off of him, right? Actually, it was Emil and they play out in that way. I forget who, but they didn't have Frankie Amaya, Daniel Edelman, one of the two in the holding mid spot. They had a suspension. So they had to drop Wiki into the 6 and then had somebody else. Anyways, sorry. What happened at halftime, they weren't getting a ton of chances. So they flip flopped and they let Emil play as a number 9 who kind of dropped off of the line. And Lewis Morgan played wide and did more of the pressing. And they got more success that way. So he would fit in that little fluidity as well, where he can go and float in as a high number 9 if he wanted to, with Morgan dropping off, or he can stay in the pocket, whatever it may be. I think it makes a lot of sense for him to go there, especially because he knows the system as well. He knows that shape really well. But another place that I thought made sense was Colorado, right? Navajo may not be here. It may not be brought back after his loan expired. They're going to need to get another attacking option. Armas already knows the Red Bull style of play, right? He has tons of quality around him in Mihailovic and Bassett and all these players who are going to get him chances. That might be a good look as well. Now, realistically, is he going to want to go to Colorado? I doubt it. But LAFC would be a big destination as well. Again, club history, location, pedigree, open DP spot. Like that could be a place for him to look as well. But I think really Red Bull makes the most sense.
I would agree. Yeah, I actually think Red Bull is a perfect place for him. He's got history with Forsberg. Like he's played
Oh
with on the
yeah,
same team as Forsberg, so you already got built-in chemistry there. You have the Red Bull pipeline. It'd be very easy for Leipzig and Red Bull RBNY to make a deal happen. And you would think like if two of the same deals are on the table, and one of them's Red Bull and one of them's Colorado, let's just say like Leipzig's probably going to go with Red Bull, right? Like it's still
Mhm.
within their organization. They still have ultimately control over it. So I think it makes all the sense in the world for him to go to Red Bull. And honestly, I think we're talking about one of the best attacks in the league if Timo Werner goes to RBNY.
Yeah, you wouldn't be wrong there. The last player rumored as being unhappy, and I've kind of seen light MLS links, was Ciro Immobile, right? A guy faster than Ronaldo. You don't get that joke, but I'm going to send that clip to Matt. He's going to laugh about it.
I'm
Basically,
assuming it's a FIFA reference because
yeah.
the dude
So
has always
so
had like 40 pace on FIFA.
the first no, so the first he was relatively quick on FIFA, but the first time I ever played Ultimate Team, the I don't know what happened, but for whatever reason, we were able to listen in on the conversation that was going on the other side of the game, like whoever it was on. It was like this, 12-year-old kid, and I had Immobile in a German team, and I would just like we were just talking about. I just play him in behind with through balls, and at one point you just heard him scream on the mic, "This is impossible. This guy's faster than Ronaldo. I can't even catch him. This is so stupid." So every time we see him now, that's our kind of go to. But 34 years old, Italian, a little bit of a rough go in Serie A this year, and the rumor has it that he may be looking for a change of scenery. He's been displaced by former MLS standout Tati Castellanos, and could he possibly be returning to a league from which his replacement arrived? The rumors have it that MLS is fighting Saudi Arabia money, so that would already make it very difficult. But let's play pretend and say he would. What do you think about bringing him on?
Sorry, I'm a little distracted over the fact that he's got like 86 pace. I don't remember this. I
We're
swear he had like
diving deep
60
into
pace.
we're diving deep into the FIFA lore here.
Oh my God. My mind is blown. I could have sworn he had like 60 pace or something.
That's hilarious.
Maybe I'm thinking of like Football Manager or something like that. I don't even think he has that bad of pace there either. But I mean, I look at his numbers and I feel a little bit skeptical because his numbers have gone down in the last like 3 years. I mean, don't get me wrong, we're not far removed at all from him scoring 27 goals in Serie A, which if you're telling me a guy that scored 27 goals in Serie A is coming over to MLS, that sounds phenomenal. Like that's it. That would be a sensational get for MLS. But since that point, he's gone down to scoring 12 in the season following that, and now only 7 in this season, with 4 of those being penalties, by the way. And 1,600 minutes played. So it's not like he's necessarily coming off the bench every single game. He's 20 starts, 1,600 minutes, but he's only scored 3 open play goals. That has me a bit concerned. If he did come over, I could see him having, I would think he would have a Gonzalo Higuain type impact, where a guy who is not going to work super hard on the field necessarily for you. Well, I shouldn't say that because I don't really know the way he plays, but I just picture a guy who's going to know how to be in the right place to score goals. Really good penalty scorer as well in this league. Will have a lot of goals scored, but I think would need to be in the right system. And I know your follow up question will probably be, oh well, what's the
What's the
system you want him
system?
in?
I don't
But I don't know.
know.
I didn't get that far. I didn't think that far.
Well,
But
uh,
I mean, actually, I'll say this because you mentioned Tati Castellanos, my mind kind of goes to NYCFC
ooh,
because that team definitely needs a number 9 because they've
ooh,
they've needed a number 9 for a while, and I think they have good creative players. I mean, they have 900 million wingers on the team, right? Like some of them have got to be creative. And then you got
ooh.
Santi, and then I think if you put Chiro Immobile up top, especially on the baseball field. He doesn't have to go very far. I think he'd be good to find in spaces. The only issue, and I don't know if one of them could be bought down, but they do have 3 DPs on the team right now.
Right now they can't buy him down.
That's disappointing. That sucks because you got a DP spot being taken up by Thiago Martins, who
Mhm.
isn't bad, but he should surely not be on a DP spot. But that's the situation I would have liked to see him in. I think he would be a really good fit there. And the team certainly needs it, but they don't have the DP spot open. So unless somebody moved in the summer window, that's probably not a possibility for him.
Yeah. I think the kind of rumor around that was like, oh, Magno will get moved on, and then bang, here's Ciro Immobile, right? So does that happen? I don't know. Well, you mentioned 4 penalties for 7 goals. Sounds like he's an Atlanta fit. That'd be perfect for Atlanta.
I'm tired of this discourse. I'm tired of the slanderous statements against Atlanta.
I love
Our
it.
striker doesn't even take pens, I don't think.
Anyways, I think it's an interesting move if this were to happen. Again, I'm thinking it's really, really, a stretch, but Italians have been really hit or miss coming to MLS, right? You've got players like Giovinco, Chiellini, I think would be in a successful Italian player, DeVio. But then you've got players more recently, right? Insigne and Bernadeschi who have been okay, but caused a lot of issues, right? Crescito bounced after half a year. No Chirino, Pirlo, like these players who were mid at best on their best days. And then a couple of players who went through Montreal who never really kind of stood out, kind of just were there. But I would say that it wouldn't be such a stretch if a Canadian team like Toronto or Montreal were to look at players like this, right? Especially Montreal, right? Injured strikers, open DP slots. They love an Italian. I think of the 29 Italian players that have played in MLS all time, I think like half of them were at Montreal at some point because of their Bologna link. They love an Italian. They can use some of the Italians they've got to convince him maybe that it's a good spot to be, right? You've got Chonier who wants out, that playmaker it wants to get out. You could look at players like if Yankov doesn't get healthy and pick up form, maybe he slides into the forward rotation or he fills into that number 10 role where he's kind of just offset, picking up the ball and creating plays with players. I know that's not really his set, but you find a way to make that work, right? Or you can look at the lights of Portland, right? If we're going to the Western Conference, right? You can buy down or move on Felipe Mora, bring in Immobile as his replacement, surround him next to Rodriguez with a ton of other attacking pieces, right? Evander, Moreno, Anthony, these players that we keep talking about. Maybe he fits in there. Again, I think that's a real stretch. But if I'm trying to pick out like teams that one could do it because we're assuming he's going to be a designated player, and two have a need for it, maybe that's a fit too.
I like. I mean, I think the Canadian team shouts make sense. I feel like Toronto could be a good fit for him, but they're also on 3 DPs right now. I don't know, like, if any of them, like, I mean, I would assume Insigne and Bernadeschi couldn't be bought down. I don't know about Osorio, but obviously, we tack on another Italian. He could be the Andrea Bellotti that we thought was going to come over for them, and could be that guy in the striker spot to help Toronto on their very surprisingly successful season so far. I think Montreal makes a lot of sense as well, but that team just never buys DPs. So I'm always going to be skeptical about anybody going over to Montreal. They haven't had another DP besides Victor Wanyama since 2021. So I'm skeptical that anybody will ever go to Montreal as a DP again.
I'm old enough to remember the Andrea Bellotti to MLS rumors. Pepperidge
It's
Farms
not that long
remembers.
ago. What do you mean old enough to remember?
Yeah, that hasn't been a rumor for at least 3 years, like like COVID.
I mean, he was rumored when Insigne and Bernadeschi were rumored. It was like the Italian trio to come over in Toronto, which would have been sick, but
That's right. I do remember that now, but yeah, I think it probably makes sense to do that there. Toronto does have the ability to buy down Richie Larea, so it could make sense to slide him up there because they're in desperate need of a striker right now. I think Prince Owusu is coming into his own a little bit, but
I don't think
still
it's
lots.
Larea's. I think it's Insigne, Bernadeschi, and Osorio.
Well, right. I'm looking at the one that I
Oh
think you're
yeah,
looking at.
you
Yeah,
got the list.
I've sent it to you. You can find it. Like
I
I
know.
know
I keep
I know
forgetting
you
about
can.
it. I keep
Uh,
forgetting about it.
yeah.
Yeah, but
So
where did
so
you
right
send it
now,
to me?
Osorio is on a TAM deal according to the MLS released roster. So
Okay. Well, I trust that more than Wikipedia.
I don't know. That's the same league that checked and confirmed that Inter Miami didn't have 5 designated players at one time. So I don't know how
That's
much,
a really good point, honestly. Maybe I do
like
trust Wikipedia
how
more
accurate can you be with that? But I'll go off of the league's notes there, right?
because
So
you're an MLS shill. That's why.
yeah, money. Um, the thing I'll say about Montreal though is that if they do bring him in, they're gonna have 6 strikers. They're gonna need to move somebody on, and I think Mason Toy or Ibrahim probably are gonna get the chopping block. So
I mean, for a guy like Immobile, you definitely move someone on for that.
yeah, sure. And I think either way, low chance of this really actually happening. I think he just stays in Italy or moves to Saudi Arabia for a quick bag, right? Like that's what I really think is going to happen. But it'd be cool. It's cool to theorize.
Sure, we love theories on this podcast.
Yeah. So with all these players coming in, there's also this idea that there are some players that are on their way out. Nearly confirmed Enzo Capelli